be good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thinking Inside the Box, which AAC app is right for us. Our presenter today is Melissa Clarke. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thinking Inside the Box, which AAC app is right for us. Our presenter today is Melissa Clarke. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thinking Inside the Box, which AAC app is right for us. Our presenter today is Melissa Clarke. Welcome to Thinking Inside the
Are you getting a repetition there? I'm hearing it over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly what I'm hearing.
Technology.
Are you getting a repetition there? I'm hearing it over and over again. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to mute myself and maybe that'll help. Are you getting a repetition there? I'm hearing.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to start. Am I supposed to begin?
Yes, I'm sure you can start.
Okay, all right, guys. I'm just going to assume this is all working and I am not speaking to an empty space. If I do, I guess that's okay too. I'm Vicki Clarke. I'm a speech language pathologist specializing in augmentative communication at Dynamic Therapy Associates. I'm also around and about as AAC Chick, so we may have been hanging out before, and if so, that's awesome. I want to take a second just to tell everybody, or just to say to our Cough Drop crew, how much I appreciate their organization for this this wonderful event that now I think we're in the 4th year. So it's really fantastic that that they've got this set up for us, and we can go back and look at the presenters. I know I'm excited to get back to see all the other sessions that I haven't gotten to see yet. So, and I'm really excited today. I am talking about something that I just love to sort of nerd out about, and that is really looking at our AAC systems that are available to us and considering how people have, people probably a lot smarter than me, have taken verbal language, these words and messages that we hear and we speak, most of us, many of us, and have translated that into a visual language system with thousands and thousands of words and messages that everyone can access. And doing that, how you manage to do that on a dynamic display screen and organize it in a way that everybody can access. So I think it's a lot of fun to really look at those systems to be able to decide what really fits our student or our patient, their needs the best. So we're going to start, first of all, looking at the cognitive demands of using an AAC application. So I've been spending some time on the Thinking About Talking with AAC website, and I'm going to give you the link to that in a couple of slides. But it's a place where you can go and look at the research around the thinking and cognitive processes that are required in being able to navigate and use a complex, comprehensive AAC system. So when I'm thinking about cognition, I'm thinking about attention, memory, learning, or executive function. So what are the demands that are required? So this is really important for many, many of our students. All of these are initiated and sustained by motivation. I think this is something that's really important to talk about, how quickly people learn to use their AAC systems and how well they use it really can be very dependent on how motivated they are to communicate in the first place, right? I hear people say many times about, I'll hear teachers or therapists say, well, this particular student can talk all day long about NASCAR or wrestling or their football team, right? But if we ask them to talk about our academics, if we're going to talk about Abraham Lincoln or whoever academically, then all of a sudden they don't communicate that well. And a lot of times when I hear that, it kind of sounds like a negative, like it's a choice that someone makes. but that's not really true. We all remember and pay attention to things that we're interested in. And so our communication is going to be much better on those subjects than it is on subjects of someone else's choosing. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. A long time ago, I had the opportunity up at Closing the Gap many, many years ago to hear Bruce Baker talking about this. And it's kind of interesting. He just passed away the 1st of May. And I had really not pulled out this formula for a long, long time. And I had just created this slide when that occurred. And, it was a loss to our AAC community. But one of the things that he talked about in the presentation that I saw so many years ago was this motivation formula. And what he was proposing is that how successful we are in our communication is dependent on whether our motivation to communicate a message is stronger, higher than the amount of physical effort, cognitive effort, and the amount of time it takes to communicate the message. So if your motivation is lower than the amount of physical effort and cognitive effort and time that it takes, you will not communicate. You're not going to stick with it enough to communicate. So when we're thinking about our communication systems, if the subject that we're communicating about is really hard and difficult and not motivating for a child, we have to make sure that the communication method is very easy for them, right? And if we're talking about something that is very motivating and interesting for them, then we can start making more demands in terms of their communication. So as we're choosing systems, apps and light text systems, sign language, we have to make sure that we're considering those two factors, balancing out that motivation and the challenge of communication. And when we're looking at attention, what kind of attention is required, there's a lot of attention that's required for AAC systems. And again, many times I have people think that if you give a child or a person, an individual, a communication system, that they're just going to start using it. So I'll hear when I go out to troubleshoot someone's communication system and how they're doing in their setting. I'll hear things like, well, he's had the device for a year, but he doesn't want to use it. He doesn't like to use it, so he doesn't ever use it. And you find out the person hasn't been taught how to use it, right? Or and so when you look at the demand, I think people think that you give them the box and then you can push the buttons and it's just this easy thing. But it really requires a lot of cognitive attention, right? So when you're interacting with someone, you have to pay attention to your communication partner. You have to pay attention to what the activity is at hand. So if you're doing an art project, or let's just stick with art project, you're working on your art project, you have to attend to the art project and the communication partner. Then you also now have to attend to the communication device and your partner and the activity, right? So we're already got this triangle effect going on. And then if you add on their attention to the physical technique of communicating, so if they have trouble accessing the buttons, right? Or maybe they're learning how to do an auditory scan, that complicates it even further because they have to attend to that, right? And then in the middle of all of that, they have to develop their message, figure out what they want to say and what words they're going to use, right? So big demand on attention. I think in the middle of all of this, they also have to inhibit their distractors, right? So I heard someone speaking at an autism conference a few years back, and she was talking about how the people with autism that she had interviewed talk about their sensory systems being like a 7-lane highway of information. They're having to filter through what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what they're smelling, right? All of those sensations. So if you add that on top of attending to the partner and the device and the activity, we're not asking for some small thing here when we ask people to use AAC systems. So I think we have to be cognizant of all of that when we're choosing applications and we're teaching, right? In addition to paying attention, we also have to remember our message, right? So we have to think about what we want to say, and we have to remember it while we're going through the process of communicating. So it's not easy. It's like we have intersections like this in Atlanta, where I live. And I will tell you, when you're driving through this intersection, you have to think about which exit you're going to get on, and make sure that you're in the right lane so that the lane that you're in is not getting ready to end, right? Or if you're exiting, that's the correct lane. So you're having to remember all of this about how to get somewhere. And I can tell you, my daughter lives on the other side of this interchange. We call it Spaghetti Junction in Atlanta. And I have to drive through Spaghetti Junction to get to my daughter's house. I am motivated to see my daughter, right? And so I will tolerate going through Spaghetti Junction and messing around with all those lane changes to get to her. I can promise you, if I had to go through this to get to a cup of stale coffee from a gas station, I would not go, right? So motivation drives that attention and that ability to remember your pathway, right? So thinking about making sure when we're first learning that we're being really motivating with our kids or our students, right? That third factor was executive functioning. Now, this is the link over to the thinking about talking for AAC, or talking about thinking for AAC. It's TAT for AAC. This link is, you can go to that. I highly recommend it. There's a lot of really good information as we're thinking about setting up systems for students and what's involved in that. They describe executive function as a set of complex, higher order processes involved in the planning, organization, regulation, and monitoring of goal-directed behavior. So really thinking through that. I know what I want to say, and now I have to plan how I'm going to say it, maintain my attention, remember it, and then produce the message. So it's tricky, right? So the sum of all of this is it's hard, and we have to be aware of what we're asking students to do when we're asking them to navigate through systems. The tasks, when you're trying to communicate with AAC, you have to initiate your message, which that's really hard for a lot of our students. You've got to choose the most efficient pathway, how to get through that system to get to the message that you want. You've got to monitor whether you're being successful or not, if the person is understanding you or they heard what you had to say. And then once you get to that correct page, you've got to locate and select the item, right, that you want to communicate. So again, challenging. Being aware, it's pretty amazing when you see really good people who are using AAC very well. It's pretty amazing what they're coordinating in order to do that. So being respectful of that is important. So when we're thinking about choosing an AAC system, we want to pick a system that makes the most of a student's skills. So we're thinking about what is their attention and memory and learning look like? What is their vision and hearing like? What is their language level? What do they know in terms of communicate, in terms of language and vocabulary? We want to pick applications that minimize their challenges, things that are hard for them. We want to effectively teach communication. We have to teach it. We want to teach the partners how to use the system. Without partners modeling, systems rarely get used well. People have trouble learning them without other people talking with those systems. And then we want to make sure that we're explaining navigation, right, to our users. We don't want to just be whipping through pages, but we want to be talking through as we're modeling so that they can understand how these words are organized. It makes it easier to find the information. And in the middle of this, we're talking about AAC applications today, right? But I just feel like it's really important that we remember that when we're talking about a communication system, we're not just talking about one application. We're not going to slap an app on an iPad, hand it to somebody, and think that's all they need for communication. So in my world, we will give people communication devices or applications on iPads or tablets. And then we also make sure that we support around that application with light text systems. So nobody ever just has a device. They have picture symbols, and they may have other communication displays. The partners may have communication books that match the students' devices, right? And we may have switches that we're using for some simple single message output. So remembering that it is a full system. It's not just that application. Okay, so now thinking about applications. So this is tricky. It's like old McDonald, here an app, there an app, everywhere an app. There's apps everywhere, right? And so picking what is the perfect application. Now, I think it's important for us to think about the differences in these applications, because we have a tendency to select, to learn an application. We learn it really, really well, and then we over apply it to our students. everybody does this. If you're doing it, you're not in isolation. I did it. You did it. Everybody that's an AAC person does this, where you learn that application. And then because you know it well, then you teach it well. It makes sense to you, right? It's simple because that's the one that you've learned. And so you tend to use that for every student that you encounter. But one application is not always perfect for everybody. We know that. So we want to look at, and what we're going to do today for the rest of this time is just look at some of the differences in the apps and how they approach navigation and organization of their language. Now, when I'm looking at how devices are organized, this is how I organize my devices. So I consider them to either be linguistically based on language, operationally based, so that most of the navigation is based on an operational movement, environmentally based, or pragmatic or functionally based. And so we're going to dig into those and then look at some examples. We're going to actually look at some video clips of some of these applications in real time, right? I want to say too that as we're looking at applications, the applications I selected to talk about today are comprehensive communication applications. And that means they have a full range of vocabulary and messaging functioning, alphabets for spelling, multiple access methods. There are lots and lots of applications out there. And so what I would like you to be able to do is, as we go through this system and figuring out kind of which organization system this particular app lends itself to be able to look at what you have on your shelf, what you have on your iPad, and to be able to think about how that app that you have is set up for your user, right? It may not be one of the ones we're talking about, and that is okay. You don't have to pick something that I picked, but you do need to be able to evaluate it, right? All right, so let's look at these systems, okay? So the first way that I categorize my systems is pragmatically based. So pragmatically based communication systems are based on communication function. I want something, I need something, something's wrong, I'm trying to tell you something. They do have, most of them have extensive noun vocabulary, but to get to it, you have to work through that process, that function. I want something, I want to go somewhere, I want to go to this particular place, right? So you can get to that vocabulary, but you kind of go through the message first. It's really based on typical language development models where we learn to communicate a function first before we learn the form of communication. So if you think about, babies, when they are uncomfortable, they need something, they cry, right? So the function of their communicating is to let you know something's wrong, but they don't have those words yet, right? So when we're looking at pragmatically based systems, we're looking at that function first, right? That's what drives you to all the messages. Okay. All right, so let's take a look. POD, pragmatically organized dynamic display, is kind of the biggie in the world of pragmatic organization. POD is typically used in communication books, the POD books, but they are now available in applications. So this is SimPod, which is available for the iPad. And there is also now, I think Smartbox has also come out with a POD application. So let's take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to sort of narrate this for you. Okay, so we're going to start with the sentence starter. And let's see, our function is, it's time for something. It's time for what? To go somewhere. So we're making our sentence time to go. Now we're going to go get our specific vocabulary, our fringe, right, to our places, and we're going to go to the movies. It's time to go to the movies because we haven't gotten to go to the movies in a long time, right? Okay. All right, so that is POD at a pretty high level. And you'll see POD, although POD is very different organizational structure than most of our systems, once you get to this level where there's this many buttons, it starts to look a lot like some of the other systems that we're going to look at. Okay, so moving on. So now this is the lower level of pod, right? So this is for more of your emergent communicators. And you're going to see this looks very different than some of the other systems. Now this first one over here, let's take a look at this one. This is looking at using SimPod for functional requesting. Okay. I want something to eat or drink. Now I'm going to pick my food so now I can get to those specific words. It's a snack. Now I'm in a category and it's chocolate, of course. So I've made my message. I want something to eat or drink. It's chocolate, right? Okay. All right. So now we can also do some functional commenting or sharing with SimPod at this level. Let's take a look at that. I'm telling you something. It's already happened. Let's see. I'm telling you something. I moved. It's in my move category. And I walked, right? So I'm telling you something. So I have a message for you, and these are the specifics of it, right? Okay. All right. So now you're going to see pragmatic organization in other systems than Pod. They're available in other programs as well. So this is looking at this over here is Word Power 20 that is available on the Touch Chat app or on Nova Chat devices. So you'll see some of those same kinds of functional pragmatic based organization. So I want to eat. I was hungry. Nope. To watch. I want to watch Dancing with the Stars. I want to watch Dancing with the Stars up at the top. Okay. All right. Now, if I go over to my second screen, this is also on Touch Chat or Nova Chat. This is Multi-Chat 15. Very similar organization structure here. So we're going to start with that same function. I want something. So I want to eat, not vegetables, snacks, a cookie. I want to eat a cookie. Okay. All right. Okay. So now if we keep digging a little bit further, this is Snap plus Core First. So this is an application from Toby Donavox. It also has some elements of pragmatic organization. They do most of this pragmatic organization in their quickfire pages. So let's see what this one looks like. So we're going to go to the quickfire button. And these are our categories, pragmatic categories, greetings. And hi, it says, right? How are you? Wow, that's cool. Okay. We can go back, look at other functions, personal needs. I need something. I need to eat. I'm hungry, still hungry. It's lunchtime. Okay. I can go back to my other categories, feelings. I'm happy, right? Okay. Are you okay? How great. Okay. So you can see the difference on this application is the categories, the functional categories don't have a message. Like it doesn't say, I have something to say. I'm saying hello. I need something. I'm feeling something. It's a labeled category that you go to, but the function is still the same. It's based on pragmatic organization. Okay, so decision factors. So when you're looking at a system that is pragmatically organized, what do we have to consider? Who's this for, right? Well, it's best learned through functional repetition and practice, which most of ours honestly are, right? It functions the best when the individual understands reciprocal social interaction. So they already want to communicate. They hopefully, if they know what they want to say, if you go down here, we do know that the cognitive load is complicated when they have a receptive language or auditory processing challenge. So when they're learning language at the same time they're learning to communicate, that's much more difficult. So I do find that when kids who really know what they want to say, early on, the pragmatic organization works really, really well for them. Not to say that if you don't have those language skills that you can't use POD, because of course you can, but just being aware that they have to learn it through functional repetition and practice. Okay, so the next type of organization I think is the most recognized, especially if you're a speech language pathologist, and you probably are if you're hanging out with me today. This is a very speechy sort of session. But linguistic-based or language-based systems have things like semantic categories. So categories based on meaning, right? So nouns and verbs, questions, people, adjectives. They may have multi-meaning iconic encoding, which is a mouthful that I will explain in a minute. They concern themselves with word order, syntax, where we put words in correct order. And they also have morphological markers, meaning word endings. So if you want to say walk versus walked or walking, it has those supports in place. So let's look at some of those. So this is SNAP plus Core first. It has categorical word lists. It has personal word lists. It has static core word displays, and then it has color coding from left to right. So let's look at a little video on that. So if you look at this, you can see that we've got our question words, our pronouns, our actions, little words, and then our specific words in pink. So they go left to right, so that helps us with our syntax and word order. This is our word list, our comprehensive word list that are organized by category. So if I'm looking for cookie, I'm going to food and drink, right? Those are the most common ones right here. And then across the top, those pink ones are more related word lists to get you out to more details. So I went to snacks and sweets to get to my cookies and treats, right? Okay. It has a personal word list. It's going to show animals again. I'm sorry. So we have our most common animals and then our related word list for our animals. So farm animals to get to pigs and cows and sheep and horses. Okay. There's wild animals. It's going to show you a few of those wild animals. Right. And then we're going to go back again. Okay. And back. Two more. Now we're back on our home page. Okay. So that's the all word list. It also has this personal word list. This is where you put the things that are most important to that individual, right? This is a really, really important thing because the all word list, if you remember, we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of words, right? So if you have to dig through that massive word list to find something, that can be really, really tricky. Right? The personal word list gets the most important things up front and center for your student. We're making our sentence, I like favorite foods, I like Lara bars, and then I can make my whole sentence, okay? So we simplify this program by using those personal word lists, okay? All right. Avaz, it's another application, another comprehensive communication application that is very linguistically based. It has color coding by parts of speech. So there's your pronouns, subjects. It has your action words in green, descriptive words in blue, so they're color coded. It supports left to right navigation, and it has an extensive word list, a list of those words based on categories, just like the SNAP plus Core first did. So let's look at that one in action. Okay, so we can say, if we want to just quickly get to a snack, we go to food, snack, and we can just say cookies, right? Does that kind of little fun zoom. There's your morphological endings. I don't want just one cookie because who does? I want multiple cookies. So I can go up here and I can select to get my plural S, right? To get multiple cookies, okay? So you can quickly, even if your child is at a one-word level, they can access it this way as long as they can navigate. But what if they're at a multi-word level? It supports sentence development too. So we can say, I want, then we can go to our food, our specific items. There's our snacks. And we can select our cookie. And we still want more than one of those, right? Okay. All right, so that's Avaz. Avaz is one I think people miss. They don't, it's not quite as well known as some of the other ones, but it's a very good app, has lots of supports in it. Okay, so moving on. All right, let's take a look at word power. So many people know word power. Word power has been around for many, many, many years. It is very heavily based in linguistic organization. Just like Avaz and Snap, it's color coded by parts of speech. So here's our pronouns, our action words, our little words. It has an extensive vocabulary. The groups are your dictionary in Word Power. This one, something that's a little different on Word Power, is it incorporates something that we call, or they call, logical linking. So what that means is that when you select a button like Eat, it's going to take you to the most logical next step, next page, which would be food items. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so there's our groups. If we want to just quickly jump out to our item, we can go to groups. There's all of our groups. There's our food group. We can go in here and we can pick whatever we want to pick here, right? There's more snacks. These are most common in snacks and desserts, meals. Here's our items for meals, and we can pick something there, right? Okay. So we can go back to our home page. So if they're at a one-word level, again, we can just, as long as we can navigate, we can get to those items. But we can also make our sentences. So it supports that sentence development. Want to eat. Now here's the logical linking, right? It popped up food. Okay, so it kind of leads you down the pathway, right? So now logical linking is something that's really good in that it takes away that thought process for navigation. It can be challenging though, because sometimes people will learn not that the word eat means ingesting something. They'll learn that that's the button that gets them to cookies. So it can actually decrease language learning, right? We want to be really careful with that. All right, let's look some more here. Okay, now this is Gateway. Gateway is available on Proliquo to Go right now. It has been around forever, kind of came out around the same time that Word Power does, and it operates in a very similar way to Word Power in that it has left to right navigation, left to right sentence construction. It has an extensive list of word categories in the things pages. It also does that logical linking, right? So if you hit watch, you're going to get TV shows. If you select eat, you're going to get snacks. Very, very similar to our Word Power. So for me, when I'm looking at these two systems, very, very similar. So I can choose either one for a lot of my students. And a lot of times the decision I'm making is based more on the comfort level of all the partners than it is on the specific application, right? Okay, so let's think about in here, what are the decision factors? What do we have to think about when we're looking at systems that are linguistically based? So all of them have flexible core words. So those high frequency words are all available there. They're very familiar for neurotypical language learners. So this is something you'll find a lot of speech language pathologists love linguistic-based systems because, and you don't even really think about it. We understand language goes in, when we're reading, we do left to right. We understand categories like pronouns and people and actions and things. We understand those categories. So we know that if I'm looking for pizza, that's going to be a thing. It's going to be on my orange button and it's in the food group, right? We know that because we have experience with language. Now, when you're deciding on a student who's learning language and learning to use their AAC system, that doesn't help them. So be aware of that when you're making a choice. It may be easier to you, but that doesn't mean it's easier to the person who's going to be using it. So just being aware of that. You can put single words, you can creatively combine single words to develop language skills. Very easy for categories, for partners to understand because they understand categories. And again, I mentioned that this logical linking is really, really good for some people and really, really challenging for others. So knowing where your student is in terms of their language makes a big, big difference. Now, I will say that when I have a student who is learning language at the same time that they're learning to communicate, I don't always go to these systems because they are learning language, right? But if I have a team working with a student that I feel like is not really going to be engaged with me a lot on learning something new, I know that I can give a less familiar team one of these linguistically organized systems, and they are going to understand it with less instruction from me. So that can be something that really is very, very important to consider, is how comfortable are the people around the student going to be. And if you're not going to be able to do a lot of training, many people understand linguistic navigation. Okay, so now here's another language-based system, but this is based on, this is the PRC systems. This is Unity or Unidad. And it is based on MinSpeak. So MinSpeak is a system that we spoke about this earlier, developed by Bruce Baker, and it's based on the idea of semantic compaction. And basically the idea there is that a particular symbol can mean a lot of different things, right? It can, you associate, think about word association. When you look at the apple, you might associate that with nature. You might associate it with food. You might associate it with the color red. You might associate it with crunchy, right? So thinking all of those associated words that can go with this particular icon. Now, this was groundbreaking back in the day when we didn't have dynamic display where you pushed a button and it went to something else, but it was just one screen. It gave people the ability to communicate anything they wanted to communicate with one set of symbols. So it was amazing. And now it's been translated into dynamic display and it works the same way. So let's look at what this looks like. So if we go in here and we select from our icons, the apple, right? And then the apple takes us to these messages. It gets us to those specific items. We can choose breakfast. So it's our French vocabulary is there, right? But you have to get to it through the core words, right? So if I select the apple, I also have all of these other words that are associated, right? Eating is the verb, okay? And the verb is always in that same spot, right? I can construct my message. I can say eat and oatmeal, right? So thinking about it, it heavily supports motor planning. So being able to go, know that the verb is always in that exact same spot and the fringe words are always at the top. So in terms of learning, it can be very easy if you learn that motor patterning, right? Okay, it's heavily based in linguistic theory, how words are associated with each other. Now, what I find with this particular system, it does require more training for the partners. You have to be aware that when you put this in front of a partner the first time, many of them are going to be very confused by it. Speech language pathologists, I find once they have the explanation for how this works, love it, all right? But just being aware. Now, kids will learn it, though, because students learn that motor plan. So that's going to lead us into our operational organization. All right, so let's keep going. Okay, decision factors when we're looking at this system. One symbol can lead to many, many, many words and categories. So it takes some of the cognitive demand off because you learn to go to that symbol and get to these particular words. If you learn to navigate a device by visual regard, so by looking at symbols and recognizing visually what they mean, this system, the symbols can be abstract, right? So it can maybe a little more abstract than some of the others. So it can take repetition and functional outcome to learn. You have to practice it, right? The big benefit to this is that single route to each word to decrease confusion. There's one way to get to the word dirty. There's one way to get to the word pizza, right? You don't have multiple ways of doing it. So once you learn the motor plan, you've got it. Initially, it can be a little bit slower to learn, but once you have it, you've got it and you've got comprehensive language available to you. Okay. All right, so now that moves us into this operational based. So in operation, what this means is that there is the motor plan, the motor movement is what helps you remember how to get around. And when you go, like if you go to LAMP training, so that's language acquisition through motor planning, those are fantastic trainings I would recommend. You go to those and they talk about how speech, actual speech with your voice and you're moving your mouth, that those are motor plans, and every sound and every word has one motor plan. And so that's kind of the idea of this. There's one motor plan to get to something. It supports syntax, putting words in correct order, and it supports morphology actually really, really well. Oops, oh my goodness. Sorry, I jumped back somehow on my slideshow. That's okay. All right. Okay, sorry. Let's see here if I can get us to the right spot. Just a little review here for a second. All right. Okay, so operation based. So let's take a look at LAMP. So this is the app LAMP, and LAMP comes from that whole MenSpeak system, right? So Unity, Unidad, those are systems that run on the Accent devices. LAMP is the app that runs on the iPad. It only comes in this 84 location, okay? But look at let's look at how this one operates. Okay, so we still have our pronouns over here, I. All right, then it simplifies it to give us the most likely next word. I like, right? And then to eat, because we're on a theme today. I like to eat. There's our verb in that same spot, right? The verb associated with the icon's always right there. Okay, and then these are our specific terms, right? So and then we have our specific items or our fringe vocabulary. Okay. Now, something that I think that's really important to look at on LAMP, when we talk about morphological endings or verb tenses, I love what they do with this. So when you pick a verb up here, those are all the word endings, right? So any verb you pick, any of these core words that you pick, the next page that comes up is going to have this line of that verb with different tenses, like past tense and present tense, ing, present progressive, right? So that's so great for teaching language. You can see why speech pathologists really love this one, right? Okay. All right, moving on. So this is all the information. You should have a handout for me that's got this listed out. I put a lot of text on here so that you could refer back to it. But it's a lot. So it's a word-based system. There's one motor plan per word. On LAMP, no more than 3 touches are required to get to any word. There's no carrier phrases. It's all word-based. Okay. Now, Speak for Yourself is another application that really heavily relies on motor planning. On Speak for Yourself, there's a lot of similarity to LAMP, but there's some differences. One of the differences is that it only takes 2 hits to get to every single word, but you can see it only comes in this array. So there's lots of buttons on here. Okay. I'm going to keep moving because we have a lot more to cover, but you can go back and kind of see the differences. I basically went to LAMP and I went to Speak for Yourself and wrote down what the manufacturers or developers are telling us are the differences between these. Okay. Decision factors. I think the biggie for me is, what is the student's best means of processing information? Are they they're good at visual processing, or are they better at motor planning? We have kids who have cortical visual impairment and their motor plans are great. This is a fantastic system for them because they don't have to visually process the symbol every time. They can learn by position. They have to be able to access those small buttons. So that is something we have to think about. And then down here, this is an important one. The partners have to be willing to handle the learning curve, because there is a little bit of a learning curve. Once you got it, it's fantastic, but it takes a minute to learn it. Okay, other navigation that's operational is this is a very simplistic Vicki term, okay? Next page, go back, or more navigation. So just learning that the back button takes you back, and that the home button takes you to the home page, and that the little arrow going to the right gives you more vocabulary. This tends to be what kids learn first, that swiping movement. Now, the only negative to this is that you'll get kids that enjoy the swiping and the flipping, right? So if you have a kiddo that likes that, you want to be watching for this on your system. Okay. All right, so now the next is looking at environmentally based. Now, environmentally based are basically, they're pre-stored words and phrases that are chosen to match specific environments or activities. It does not mean isolated activity boards. So environmentally based systems tend to get a bad rap because people think, well, they're just an activity board. So there's a board for making cookies, and there's a board for singing Itsy Bitsy Spider, and there's a board for going to the gas station. Okay, so they're very specific boards. And the problem with that activity based is that you end up with thousands of boards, and to be able to navigate through all these boards to get to specific words is about impossible. It's very difficult to build a good language system that way. But environmentally based doesn't mean that. Basically, what we're doing is we're selecting environments that we're consistently in, and we're looking at what the words and messages are that are typically used in that environment. And the value of that is that it speeds up. Oh, I did it again, guys. I am so sorry. It speeds up your ability to communicate by giving you the whole phrase at once, right? That's relevant, the phrase and word that's relevant to that particular environment. Okay, so Snap plus Core First is the system that uses this topic-based or environmentally based communication the most, right? So in this one, I want to let you take a look at these topics. So they have topics right here, okay? And then when you get into a topic, these are the environments that are that the person might most commonly be involved in. You can customize these, all right? So at snack time, now you see right here, these are the most common messages that you would use during snack time. And they're organized as well. So there's questions at the top. General comments are in orange on the next two rows. Positive comments are in green below that, and negative comments are in red below that. It also has a way for you to get to specific words. So if you see over here to the right side, there is topic words, okay? The topic words are the individual words, not the full phrases, but the individual words that are associated with snack time. Now, what this does for you and the end user is you don't have to go dig through that entire word list, that massive word list with all those categories and subcategories to get to something that's relevant during snack time, right? You could go ahead and go in here and quickly jump to the relevant words. So what this environmentally based system does for you is it speeds up the process. It lets you be more efficient with your language, okay? Now, would you want a system that only had this? Probably not, because it doesn't really let you build language, right? So that's why Snap has those core words too. Okay, so moving on. You'll find this topic-based organization sort of as a do-it-yourselfer in other systems. So this is Proloquo Gateway, where you can build your own. Avaz has the same thing. They have some topics that aren't fully developed that you can go in and build as well. So things to think about with this one. You have an increased rate of communication, decreased navigation need. It can be highly customized, which is positive and negative, right? Because you got to get in there and customize it and make sure that the person is involved with you in those decisions. It works best when the student understands connected social language. So if you've got that kiddo who's super, super social, this might be a place that you want to go, right? You can use it to teach social scripts to kids who have trouble with social language, right? So thinking about your student, negative is that it requires navigation to get to things that are sort of off script, right? All right, so looking back at a review for this, these are our systems. There's linguistic systems, operational systems, environmental systems, and pragmatic systems. So that's kind of how we divide it up. Now, everything I showed you has some component of all of these things, right? But each of them is better at a specific area. So if you kind of think through that a little bit. So we want to make sure that our students are able to engage. So that's that function-based language. We want to make sure that they have access to their symbols that they need. So they have fringe words and categories and sentence construction. We want to make sure that they're learning how to put words together. So that's your core words and consistent motor planning on your system. And finally, we need to be able to function, to communicate for real reasons, real purposes. And that's where you get into environmentally based words and phrases. And that creates your whole entire AAC system. So only one of these, generally, I like it all. I want all of these ways of communicating because I feel like in different situations, different subjects, depending on how motivated and socially engaged I am and how much language I have, I may need bits and pieces of all of this. All the systems I showed you have, either they have all of these available or they have the ability for you to build them. Okay, so some of the systems, looking at systems designed based on engagement, SimPod, Pod, Multi-Chat, Word Power 20, systems that are designed to give you a lot of symbols that are organized, Word Power, Avaz, Proloquo, based on syntax, really strong supports for putting words together into sentences and word endings, LAMP, Unity, Speak for Yourself. And finally, those systems that are really good at functional communication, Snap Plus Core First is a good one for that. Now, in your handout, you should have access to what I wanted to do for you is, I don't want to tell you what to pick for your student, right? I want you to be able to look at what you have and evaluate it. So there is this handout that allows you to look at the different organizational systems and consider your system and how it works to support these different types of organizations. So thinking about that when you're choosing for your student. If you will take that form, I have a little freebie, a little contest, I guess, for you guys. This is all our program here, Dynamic Therapy Associates, involves a clinic, our school-based system, and our social media or resource sharing through AAC Chicks. We also have a membership-based website. And if you will complete that form that I gave you that is in your handouts, if you'll go through, pick the app that you have or the system that you have, and you'll fill that out and send it to me. So that's Vicki at mydynamictherapy.com. I will take all of those and I'll pick one person who will be able, I'll give you access to our membership for our website for a full year. So that's just a little incentive to get you going in and really looking at all your systems. So I'm going to stop right there. It's 1:58. I think that's it for me for today. So yep, go ahead.
There were quite a few questions about where would the handout be from the people who were wonderful presentation. Awesome.
Thank you.
Learned a lot.
Oh, great.
This was fantastic. And I'll probably join your group as soon as I can get off of here.
Awesome. Well, I think I turned in some handouts. I turned in the handouts for through the AAC in the cloud. So I'm thinking that those are available. Okay. If they are not available, what I will do is I will post a link to those handouts. I'll put it on all of our social media when I finish today, okay? So you can go to Dynamic Therapy Associates on Facebook. You can search at AAC Chicks on Instagram or Twitter, and you can access it that way. And if you don't see it, if you're not a social media person, you don't see that, you can just send me an email and just say, hey, send me that handout if it's not available through AAC in the cloud. Okay.
That's just okay. Thank you so very much. You know a lot, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, let me type the information in to, it's at AAC Chicks.
Yes, and I'll go ahead and share my screen again, okay? And then you can see it, all right? Let's see here. Okay, so this is at AAC Chicks is where you're going to access, either if you're on Instagram or you're on Twitter, you can reach us through that little name. The website is mydynamictherapy.com. That's our clinic-based website. DTAschools.com is our school-based website. That's where the membership is. But if you, and then here's my email address. So you should be able to find me, I'm thinking. I apologize. I would have put a link here, but I was thinking that it was coming through AAC in the cloud. So I will make sure that it is posted everywhere it can be posted. I'll give you the slideshow with all of the information so you can go back and look through that. And then it'll also have that, that sheet for evaluating your AAC apps that you can send to me, and I'll pick somebody to win the access to the website.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was nice being able to talk to all of you. I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Okay.